Fight fans, before we get into this video, I have a small favor to ask which will make a massive difference to my channel. Please can I kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel and also give this video a thumbs up. It will be massively appreciated. Fight fans, Khabib Nurmagomedov is easily one of the biggest stars in the history of mixed martial arts and often brought up as a GOAT. Whilst I think he is undoubtedly a formidable former champion and somebody who has legendary status in this sport, I personally don't put him in that category as one of the greatest of all time, which I know might sound contentious, but I'm going to give you a bit of a breakdown as to why I feel that way. However, just to be clear, I want to make this very, very obvious because I don't want it to be taken out of context. Is Khabib Nurmagomedov a legend? Yes. Did he dominate his opponents? Yes. If there's anything that is undoubted, it's that he dominated his opponents from start to finish in most fights. However, did he leave a legacy which puts him up there with the GOATs? No. And that's something which I'm going to give 3 valid reasons, which are just my opinion. I'd welcome your opinion as well. Feel free to debate this in the comments. Reason number 1. He didn't fight the best competition before the UFC. Now, I would challenge anybody who disagrees with this argument to name one of the opponents Khabib Nurmagomedov faced before he arrived in the UFC. Because he had a big record before he reached the UFC with 16-0. However, most of us probably can't actually name anybody who he faced before getting to the UFC. And it's not as if he came from another respectable promotion and fought, somewhere else where he was beating good competition. It's not as if he came from Bellator or the PFL, for example. He came from a range of local promotions and regional promotions in Russia, which perhaps were producing decent fighters, but none of them, from what I can see, actually made it on the main circuit in mixed martial arts. None of them got to the level of the UFC, for example. So those wins haven't really aged very well. And then number 2 very much resembles point number 1, but when he did come to the UFC, I would argue when you look at his resume, he didn't really fight the best competition. So these are the fights he had before he fought for the title against Al Iaquinta. And I have to say, some of these names, again, are fights which have not aged really well. I mean, he beat one former champion in Rafael dos Anjos, fair enough. And then there's a couple other notable names in there who have been around in the UFC for a long time. So Edson Barboza and Michael Johnson still fight in the UFC as of 2026. But let's be really honest, neither of them have ever got close to a title in the UFC. And none of the competition that he faced before those opponents have made it anywhere near a title in the UFC either. So whilst he was able to hold his fort in the UFC and definitely earn a title shot by going unbeaten in the UFC for a long time, in theory, I would say his opponents were not actually that competitive on paper. Now, you can only beat what's in front of you, so fair enough that he was able to get past all these opponents. But then again, I wouldn't say any of these opponents have gone on to do great things, and I don't think any of these wins have aged fantastically in the grand scheme of things to build up his resume. And then number 3, which is the main reason, he didn't have a long title run. When we think of greats, the greatest of all time, we think about opponents who have literally cleared out their division. We think about fighters who have had a long title run, a formidable title run, which is basically seeing them defeat contender after contender after contender. And this is why the argument is typically made for the likes of John Jones, George St. Pierre, Demetrius Johnson, and Anderson Silva. But with Khabib, he definitely fought some high-profile names in Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. But that was essentially his title run. He beat Al Iaquinta for the title in the first instance for a vacant championship, which again is a name which hasn't really aged very well in terms of his resume. But then beating McGregor, Poirier, and Gaethje, fair enough. Those are names which have good clout on your CV. But those are 3 title defenses. And I don't think that necessarily puts you in GOAT status. Some would maybe say the fact that I'm really giving him credit for the win against McGregor is kind, because this was probably a Conor McGregor who was mentally checked out of mixed martial arts and focusing on doing other things like making money from filing Floyd Mayweather, for example, in boxing. But look, he beat 3 very big names in the sport to defend his championship, but didn't hold it for much longer. If he added another few title fights to this resume, then of course we are talking about someone who is in that conversation. But I think for the simple fact, above all other points, that he didn't have a long title run, that's why you can't really put him in the GOAT conversation. And look, just to summarize, because I don't want this to be taken out of context, he retired long before he could put together a title run that reached the same levels of John Jones and Georges St-Pierre, and I totally respect that was very much a personal decision he made as a priority. I do want to add, could he have become a GOAT? Absolutely. I'm not saying Khabib is not a GOAT because he wasn't talented enough. This guy was dominant. Yes, he didn't fight the best competition, but I genuinely believe there was probably nobody else who would have stopped him until he wanted to give up eventually anyway. I think also his resume probably could have benefited from wins against guys with some name value if he had fought a Tony Ferguson and Eddie Alvarez before getting a title shot, or as champion whilst they were somewhat in their prime. I think that probably would have made his resume more memorable, because before his title reign, I don't think any of us really remember any of the guys who he beat. And even in the UFC, none of those wins have particularly aged well, to be honest. But I do think it's worth ending with a bottom line. He retired early for personal reasons, so full respect for Khabib for taking that decision. The reason he retired was, as we know, a big decision based on the passing of his father. So really, what my personal opinion is on his legacy is completely irrelevant, because he took a decision which was more important for him than what somebody like myself and other mixed martial arts fans think. And the most important thing is, he seems happy in his personal life and as being a coach. And look, I don't know Khabib personally. I'm just going based on what we see from him nowadays as a coach when he's in the corner for some of his cousins, and when he's in the corner for other fighters like Islam Makhachev, for example. This is a guy who seems very content and happy in his life, and the fact that he didn't reach what I would consider to be GOAT status is irrelevant if he's happy. And he still goes down as a legend. He still goes down as somebody who was clearly very, very skillful, very dominant, and gave us maybe not necessarily the most entertaining fights, but definitely some of the most memorable moments when he was able to beat Conor McGregor the way he did, when he was able to finish fights against Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, who is, as of today, you know, the current lightweight champion. He was able to beat the future lightweight champion. So, full respect to Khabib for what he's achieved. I'm just putting the constructive points together that whilst he was a legend, I don't think he's a GOAT. But of course, the bottom line is more important than anything else. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is Khabib a GOAT? Am I overlooking his accomplishments? Let me know in the comments. I'll be really interested to hear.